My name is Rachel. I'm 29 years old, and I always dreamed my wedding day would be perfect. Instead, I received a text from my Harvard-educated parents that shattered me. It's just a trivial event for someone at the bottom. You see, I'm a kindergarten teacher who fell in love with David, a construction worker with a heart of gold. Our crime? Choosing happiness over status. Before I continue my story, where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments, hit subscribe, and join me on this journey of heartbreak and healing. I grew up in Wellesley, Massachusetts, one of Boston's wealthiest suburbs, where success wasn't measured in happiness but in square footage, luxury cars, and Ivy League bumper stickers. My mother graduated top of her class from Harvard Law and became a corporate attorney at Benson Marshall and Wright, one of Boston's most prestigious firms. She specialized in mergers and acquisitions, representing clients worth billions. Her wardrobe consisted exclusively of designer suits. Her handbags cost more than some people's monthly rent, and her demeanor was always calculated, controlled, and coldly efficient. My father, equally ambitious, earned his MBA from Stanford before climbing the corporate ladder at lightning speed. By 40, he was CEO of Nextech Solutions, a technology company that developed software for financial institutions. He worked 18-hour days, traveled constantly, and measured everything in terms of ROI, return on investment. This included his time with family. Together, they were Boston's power couple, featured in business magazines, invited to exclusive galas, and members of clubs so elite they didn't even have signs on their buildings. Our house was a 7,000-square-foot colonial with manicured grounds, a swimming pool no one used, and rooms designed for impressing guests rather than living in. We also maintained vacation properties in Nantucket, Aspen, and later, a villa in Tuscany that my parents visited perhaps once every 2 years. Their relationship with each other always struck me as a business partnership more than a love story. They consulted on major decisions, presented a united front to the world, and seemed to genuinely respect each other's intelligence and drive. But warmth, affection? Those were rare commodities in our household, saved for public appearances and photo opportunities. From my earliest memories, I understood that exceptional achievement wasn't requested, it was required. My kindergarten finger paintings weren't displayed on the refrigerator, but critiqued for technique. Piano lessons began at age 4, not because I showed interest or talent, but because it would look good on future college applications. By 3rd grade, I had a color-coded schedule of extracurricular activities designed to build the perfect resume: violin lessons on Mondays, Chinese language on Tuesdays, competitive swimming on Wednesdays, debate club on Thursdays, and volunteer work, carefully selected for maximum impact, on weekends. Rachel, the world is divided into leaders and followers, my father would say during our monthly performance reviews, where my academic progress was tracked on actual spreadsheets. And Parkers are leaders, period. My mother's approach was more subtle, but equally pressuring. "Darling, do you know where Jessica Abernathy is now?" she would ask about former classmates. "Already published in a scientific journal, and she's only 15. The unspoken question always hung in the air. Why aren't you doing more? The trajectory was clear: Phillips Exeter Academy, then Harvard, Yale, or at worst Princeton, followed by medical school or law school. Eventually, I would marry someone from a good family with similar credentials, have exactly 2 children, spaced 3 years apart for optimal career planning, and continue the dynasty. But something didn't quite fit. While I was smart enough to get good grades, I lacked the cutthroat ambition my parents prized. I found myself drawn to different values. When classmates cried, I was the one who comforted them. When I saw homeless people during our rare family outings in the city, I asked questions my parents found uncomfortable. And when I read stories, I was more interested in characters who found happiness through connection than those who achieved conventional success. My mother called me sensitive, never as a compliment. My father said I needed to toughen up for the real world. Neither understood that I wasn't failing to become like them. I was becoming someone else entirely. The first major crack in our family facade appeared when college decision time arrived. Despite my parents' extensive connections and donations, I wasn't accepted to Harvard. I did, however, receive offers from Yale, Columbia, and several excellent state universities. To my parents' horror, I chose the University of Massachusetts. "It's practical," I explained at dinner, trying to sound confident as my mother's fork froze midway to her mouth. "Their education program is excellent, and the scholarship means I won't graduate with debt." "Education program?" My father's voice was dangerously quiet. "I don't recall discussing teaching as a career option." "That's because we didn't," my mother interjected, her voice tight. "Rachel, be serious. If you're having doubts about law, we can discuss medicine or perhaps business. But teaching? That's what people do when they can't do anything else." The conversation deteriorated from there. Words like disappointment, potential, and family reputation were thrown around. Liberally, the decision to attend UMass was treated as both personal betrayal and tactical error, the first major failure in my otherwise carefully orchestrated life. Their punishment came swiftly but strategically. While they wouldn't completely cut off financial support that would look bad to their social circle, they significantly reduced it. My housing allowance would cover a shared dorm room, not the private apartment they'd planned. My spending money was cut by 70%. The car they'd promised for graduation mysteriously became something we should revisit later. I took out small student loans and found part-time jobs, working at the university library, tutoring high school students, and even waiting tables at a local restaurant. Each shift taught me something my privileged upbringing never had: the value of earned money, the dignity in all types of work, and the reality of how most people lived. For the first time in my life, I was making choices based on what I wanted, not what would look impressive on a resume or please my parents. The sensation was terrifying, exhilarating, and addictive. I was becoming my own person, one decision at a time. College opened my eyes to a world my parents had carefully filtered out of our exclusive bubble. My roommate Amanda came from a working-class family in western Massachusetts. Her father was a plumber, her mother a hospital receptionist. She was the first in her family to attend college, worked 30 hours a week while maintaining a full course load, and never once complained about it. Her resilience humbled me. Through Amanda, I met people from backgrounds utterly foreign to my upbringing. Students who had overcome poverty, immigration challenges, family tragedies, and systemic barriers. Their perspectives transformed my understanding of privilege, opportunity, and what constituted success. They didn't measure achievement in brand names or social connections, but in personal growth, community contribution, and authentic happiness. During sophomore year, I began volunteering at Springfield Elementary School, a 20-minute drive from campus. The school served primarily lower-income families, with many students receiving free or reduced lunch. My role was simple: read with struggling students twice a week. But those hours quickly became the highlight of my week. I'll never forget Miguel, a second grader with bright eyes and a hesitant smile, who struggled with reading after moving from Puerto Rico the previous year. The first time he successfully read a full page without help, he looked up at me with such pride that something shifted permanently in my heart. This feeling, this connection, was more meaningful than any academic achievement or social accolade I'd ever received. "Miss Rachel, will you be our teacher next year?" he asked one day as our session ended. "I'm not a real teacher yet," I explained. "I'm still in college." "But you will be, right?" His certainty about my path struck me. "You're too good at it not to be." That evening in my dorm room, I researched education programs with an intensity that surprised even me. I read about child development, educational psychology, teaching methodologies, and certification requirements. The more I learned, the more certain I became. This wasn't a fallback career or temporary rebellion against my parents. This was my calling. The decision crystallized one spring afternoon while observing a kindergarten classroom. The teacher, Mrs. Gonzalez, moved through the room with gentle authority, adjusting her approach for each child's needs. More structure for some, creative freedom for others. She celebrated small victories, mediated conflicts with wisdom, and created a space where every child felt valued. I watched, transfixed, as she laid foundations not just for academic learning, but for emotional intelligence, social skills, and self-confidence. This, I realized, was power, not the kind my parents recognized, but the power to shape future generations. Breaking the news to my parents required strategic planning. I suggested dinner at Ristorante Milano, an expensive Italian restaurant. They approved of, hoping the public setting might moderate their reaction. My father ordered a $200 bottle of wine while reviewing quarterly reports on his phone. My mother discussed her recent charity gala success while scanning the room for familiar faces or potential connections. I waited until the main course arrived before speaking the words I'd rehearsed dozens of times. I've decided on my major and career path. I'm going to be a kindergarten teacher. The silence that followed seemed to suspend time itself. My father set down his fork with deliberate precision. A teacher. His voice was flat. You want to be a glorified babysitter when you could be arguing cases before the Supreme Court or discovering the next breakthrough drug. My mother's approach was more calculated. Darling, I understand the appeal of working with children, perhaps pediatric medicine or family law. Even child psychology would utilize your nurturing tendencies while maintaining professional standing. I don't want professional standing, I said, surprised by my steady voice. I want to make a difference in children's lives. Early education shapes everything that follows. So does poverty, my father snapped, which you'll experience firsthand, on a teacher's salary. We didn't invest hundreds of thousands in your upbringing for you to waste your potential, my mother added, her smile tight and eyes cold. This is obviously a phase. The conversation continued in this vein throughout. Dinner, dessert, and the drive home. Their arguments ranged from practical concerns about financial security to thinly veiled threats about social consequences and family disappointment. Not once did they ask why this path called to me or what fulfillment I might find in it. I graduated, 3 years later with honors in early childhood education. My parents attended the ceremony, their presence more obligation than celebration. They gave me a check, generous by normal standards but modest by theirs, and my mother whispered, "The offer for law school still stands when you come to your senses." My first teaching position came at Meadowbrook Elementary in a middle-class suburb of Boston. My classroom, room 16, became my kingdom. I painted the walls myself, scoured thrift stores for books and educational toys, and spent weeks designing a space where 5-year-olds could feel safe, inspired, and valued. Opening day arrived with 22 small faces looking up at me with varying degrees of excitement, anxiety, and curiosity. Jaden, who hid behind his mother's legs. Sophia, who announced she could already read chapter books. Marcus, whose medical forms indicated severe allergies and whose eyes held a wariness beyond his years. Each child a complete universe of potential, each one entrusted to my care. The work was exhausting, often thankless, and paid barely enough to cover my modest apartment and student loan payments. I supplemented my income by tutoring and teaching summer school. Designer clothes became consignment shop finds. Vacations became weekend road trips with teacher friends, and I had never been happier. My relationship with my parents deteriorated to holiday obligation visits and occasional phone calls. Each interaction followed a predictable pattern. Inquiries about my career situation, thinly veiled suggestions about opportunities in their network, and updates about classmates who were really making something of themselves as doctors, executives, and attorneys. During one Thanksgiving dinner, my mother casually mentioned that Michael Harrington, son of a federal judge and Harvard Law graduate, would be attending their annual Christmas party. "He's just made partner at Sullivan and Cromwell," she added with practiced nonchalance. "Divorced last year, no children. You should come to the party." "I'm teaching winter concert that weekend," I lied, having learned that direct refusals only extended uncomfortable conversations. My father looked up from his phone. Still playing with finger paint and managing temper tantrums? How fulfilling. I took a sip of water to hide my expression. "Actually, we're currently exploring states of matter through hands-on experiments. Yesterday, we made predictions about whether different substances would sink or float, then tested our hypotheses." Amara, who barely spoke English at the beginning of the year, used the word density correctly in a sentence. My pride was met with blank stares. They couldn't see the miracle in a 5-year-old grasping scientific concepts, or in a shy child finding her voice. In their world, success had specific parameters, and I had chosen to live outside them. I met David Fletcher on an unusually warm April morning during my 3rd year of teaching. Meadowbrook Elementary was undergoing renovations to modernize the 50-year-old building, and my classroom had been selected for new windows and improved insulation. The work was scheduled during spring break, but delays meant construction would overlap with classes. "We'll try to be as unobtrusive as possible," the principal assured me. "The crew will work during lunch breaks and after school hours when they can." On that particular morning, I arrived early to prepare materials for our butterfly life cycle unit. Engrossed in cutting chrysalis patterns, I didn't notice someone entering until a throat cleared behind me. "Excuse me, ma'am. I need to take some measurements for the window frames." I turned to find a tall man in work clothes, tool belt slung low on his hips, clipboard in hand. With dark hair, warm brown eyes, and a day's worth of stubble, he looked about my age, maybe slightly older. "Of course," I gestured toward the windows. "I'll be out of your way in a minute." "No rush." His smile revealed a small gap between his front teeth that somehow made him more approachable. "I'm David, by the way. Lead carpenter on this project." "Rachel Parker. This is my classroom." He glanced around at the colorful displays, the reading corner with its canopy of artificial leaves, the science station with magnifying glasses and collection jars. "I can tell you put a lot of heart into this place." There was genuine appreciation in his voice, not the condescension I'd grown accustomed to hearing when people learned about my profession. We chatted briefly about the renovation plans before he excused himself to begin working. Over the next week, David and his crew became a familiar presence. Unlike some of the other workers who treated the school environment as just another job site, David showed remarkable consideration. He remembered students' names, answered their curious questions about his tools, and once spent his lunch break helping me move furniture to accommodate a special project. I learned bits of his story in casual conversations. Raised in South Boston, by a single mother who worked as a nurse's aide, David had started working weekends at 16 to help with bills. After high school, he apprenticed with a carpenter instead of attending college, learning the trade from the ground up. Now 32, he had worked his way up to project manager at Bradford Construction, overseeing commercial renovations throughout the city. "College just wasn't in the cards financially," he explained one afternoon as he helped me hang student artwork out of reach of the construction dust. "But I've always loved working with my hands, solving problems, seeing something tangible at the end of the day." His pride in his craftsmanship was evident in everything he touched. When installing the new bulletin boards in my classroom, he took extra time to ensure they were perfectly level, the corners precisely mitered. "The kids deserve quality work," he said simply when I thanked him for his attention to detail. One Friday after school, as the renovation was nearing completion, David asked if I'd like to grab coffee. We walked to a small cafe near the school, our conversation flowing easily from work to movies to childhood memories. One coffee stretched into two, then dinner at the pizza place next door. Unlike dates I'd been on with the men from my parents' social circle, formal affairs at expensive restaurants where conversations revolved around career trajectories and vacation properties, this felt refreshingly authentic. David asked thoughtful questions and listened to my answers. He spoke about his work with unpretentious enthusiasm and shared funny stories about his 3 nephews. My sister's kids, he explained, showing me pictures on his phone. 7, 5, and 3. Complete tornadoes, but the best kids in the world. When he talked about building them a treehouse the previous summer, his face lit up with genuine joy. Here was someone who measured wealth not in dollars, but in relationships, experiences, and personal satisfaction. Our coffee date turned into weekend hikes in the Blue Hills, impromptu picnics, and movie nights at my apartment. David appreciated simple pleasures: a perfectly grilled burger, a spectacular sunset, finding the last piece to complete a puzzle. He worked hard but maintained perspective about what truly mattered in life. My dad left when I was 8. He told me one evening as we walked along the Charles River. Mom had to work double shifts just to keep the lights on. It taught me early that stuff is just stuff. People, time together, that's the real currency. His outlook resonated deeply with the values I'd embraced since breaking from my parents' materialistic worldview. With David, I never had to explain why I chose teaching over more lucrative options. He understood intuitively that fulfillment couldn't be measured in dollar signs or status symbols. As our relationship deepened, I found myself falling in love with his integrity, his gentle strength, and his capacity for joy in ordinary moments. After 6 months of dating, we began discussing a future together, tentatively at first, then, with increasing certainty. There was just one obstacle: introducing David to my parents. I had avoided the subject, making excuses about their busy schedules or downsizing holiday gatherings. But as our 1-year anniversary approached, I couldn't postpone the inevitable any longer. "They're going to hate me," David said matter-of-factly as we drove to my parents' house for dinner. He wore his best clothes, khaki pants and a button-down shirt that looked uncomfortable compared to his usual jeans and flannel. "They don't hate people," I tried to reassure him. "They just categorize them according to usefulness and status." David laughed. "That's not better, Rach." "Just be yourself," I said, squeezing his hand. "Anyone who knows you respects you. Maybe they will too." But even as I spoke the words, doubt gnawed at me. My parents had spent a lifetime judging people by their pedigrees and potential advantages. Would they see past David's lack of credentials to recognize his character? Or would their prejudices blind them to the wonderful man I loved? As we pulled into the circular driveway of my childhood home, David whistled low under his breath. "You grew up here? This looks like a museum." I saw the imposing colonial through his eyes, the perfectly symmetrical facade, manicured landscaping, the conspicuous luxury of it all. "It never really felt like home," I admitted, "more like a showroom we happened to sleep in." Taking a deep breath, I reached for the brass knocker, sending up a silent prayer that just this once, my parents might surprise me. My mother opened the door wearing a navy St. John knit dress and pearls, her version of casual dinner attire. Her eyes swept over David in a millisecond assessment that I knew found him wanting. "Rachel, darling." She air-kissed my cheek, her perfume an expensive cloud around us. "And this must be Daniel." "David," I corrected, feeling the first twist of anxiety in my stomach. "David Fletcher." "Of course." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Come in, David. Charles is in the study. Finishing a call, he'll join us shortly." The house looked exactly as it always had. Immaculate, impersonal, and intimidating. Original artwork by recognized artists adorned the walls. Persian rugs covered gleaming hardwood floors. Fresh flower arrangements sat on every surface, perfectly, symmetrical and utterly joyless. David followed me into the formal living room, his normally confident posture slightly stiff. I squeezed his hand reassuringly before my mother directed us to sit on the cream-colored sofa where I'd once spilled grape juice at age 7 and received a lecture about responsibility and consequences. "So, David," my mother perched on the sheep edge of an armchair, "Rachel tells us you work in construction, is it?" Her tone made construction sound like organized crime. "Yes, ma'am. I'm a project manager with Bradford Construction. We specialize in commercial renovations, schools, hospitals, historic buildings. Fascinating." Her eyes said otherwise. "And where did you attend university?" The dreaded question, delivered so quickly. I felt David tense beside me. "I didn't, Mrs. Parker. I went straight into carpentry apprenticeship after high school." "I see." 2 syllables loaded with judgment. How practical. My father chose that moment to make his entrance, iPad in hand as always. At 62, he remained imposing. 6 feet tall, physically fit from his thrice-weekly sessions with a personal trainer, his silver hair expertly cut to suggest authority and success. "Sorry for the delay. Tokyo doesn't respect dinner hours." He extended his hand to David with businesslike efficiency. "Charles Parker." "David Fletcher, sir. Nice to meet you." My father's handshake was notoriously firm, a power move he'd perfected over decades of corporate intimidation. To his credit, David matched his grip without flinching. "Shall we move to the dining room?" My mother rose gracefully. "Marguerite has prepared coq au vin." The formal dining room, with its 12-person table and crystal chandelier, had hosted senators, CEOs, and once a minor European royal. Tonight, just 4 place settings occupied one end of the massive mahogany expanse. My father took his customary position at the head, my mother to his right, with David and me facing her. The first course, a chilled asparagus soup, arrived via Marguerite, our longtime housekeeper, whose subtle wink was the only genuine warmth I'd received since arriving. "So, David," my father began, his CEO voice in full effect, "Rachel mentioned you're in construction. What exactly does that entail?" David explained his role managing budgets, schedules, and teams of skilled tradespeople, his voice growing more confident as he described complex projects and problem-solving challenges. In any normal setting, his evident competence and responsibility would be impressive. Interesting. My father's tone suggested the opposite. "And what does someone in your position earn annually, if you don't mind my asking?" "Dad?" I interjected, mortified. "It's a reasonable question, Rachel. If you're serious about this young man, financial compatibility is important." David handled the intrusion with surprising grace. "I do well enough, Mr. Parker. My company values skilled management, and I've been with them for 11 years now. But nothing approaching what Rachel could be earning if she'd followed through with law school," my father pressed. "Teachers and tradespeople. It's an unusual combination." "I think it works well," David replied evenly. "We both create things. Rachel shapes young minds, and I build spaces where that learning happens. There's value in tangible contributions." My mother, who had been silently observing, joined the inquisition as the main course arrived. "And your family, David? What do your parents do?" "My mother is retired now. She worked as a nurse's aide at Boston Medical Center for 30 years. "And your father?" she persisted. "Not in the picture. He left when I was 8. "How challenging for you," my mother remarked with manufactured sympathy. "Those statistics do show higher rates of relationship instability in certain demographics." The implication hung in the air like a noxious gas. I glanced at David, whose jaw had tightened, though his expression remained neutral. "I think what makes relationships work is commitment and shared values," he said carefully. My mother taught me that through her example, raising 3 kids on her own and never missing a school conference or baseball game despite working double shifts. Admirable, my father said dismissively. Though proper family planning might have made her life easier. I nearly choked on my wine. Dad, that's completely inappropriate. I'm simply stating facts, Rachel. Choices have consequences. Speaking of which, have you two discussed your long-term plans, career trajectories, financial goals? Before I could answer, my mother interjected. Rachel's trust fund has specific conditions, David. I hope you understand that. Trust fund? David looked at me, confusion evident. I had never mentioned it because, frankly, I rarely thought about it. After choosing teaching, I'd mentally separated myself from my parents' wealth, determined to live on my earnings. It's not relevant, I said firmly. Of course it's relevant, my father countered. $20 million is always relevant. David's eyes widened slightly, but he recovered quickly. With all due respect, sir, I'm with Rachel because I love her, not because of any financial considerations. My father's laugh was sharp and unpleasant. Young man, I've been in business long enough to know that everyone has a price. What's yours, I wonder? Charles, my mother murmured. Perhaps a bit more subtlety. Why bother? Let's be direct. My father set down his fork. David, what exactly are your intentions toward my daughter? Because from where I sit, it looks like you found yourself a meal ticket with an Ivy League pedigree and substantial inheritance prospects. The accusation landed like a physical blow. David's face flushed, but his voice remained steady. Mr. Parker, I understand you're protective of Rachel. But you've known me for less than 2 hours and have already made assumptions about my character based entirely on my occupation and background. I earn a good living. I own my condo outright. I have retirement savings and no debt. I don't need Rachel's money. I need her kindness, her laughter, her perspective on life. My mother's expression turned coldly analytical. Rachel has always been somewhat idealistic. Perhaps this is another phase like teaching, a temporary rebellion against her upbringing. That was the breaking point for me. Years of conditional approval, subtle undermining, and outright dismissal crystallized into a moment of perfect clarity. This isn't a phase, Mother. It's my life. The one I've chosen, not the one you scripted for me before I was born. I looked between my parents. David is the most honest, hard-working, compassionate person I've ever known. He values people for who they are, not what they can offer him. That's something neither of you have ever understood. My father's face hardened. You're being naive, Rachel. People from different worlds don't build successful lives together. It's a basic incompatibility. Different worlds? I laughed incredulously. You mean people with different bank accounts, different alumni associations, different country club memberships. Don't be dramatic, my mother sighed. We simply want what's best for you. No, you want what maintains your image of success. But I'm not an extension of your ambitions. I'm a separate person with my own values. My father's patience, never substantial, evaporated completely. This has gone far enough. Rachel, you have a choice to make. Either end this inappropriate phase and return to the path we've invested so much in preparing for you, or face the consequences. David, who had maintained remarkable composure throughout, finally spoke. Sir, with respect, ultimatums rarely strengthen family bonds. Rachel is an extraordinary woman who makes thoughtful choices. Your daughter deserves your support, even when her vision differs from yours. Support? My father nearly spat the word. We've supported her every step of the way. Private schools, extracurricular opportunities, connections most people would kill for. And how does she repay us? by deliberately squandering every advantage to play house with someone who hammers nails for a living. Charles! Even my mother seemed shocked by his venom. I stood, trembling with a mixture of rage and grief. We're leaving. Thank you for making your position perfectly clear. Rachel, don't be hasty. My mother's voice took on the cajoling tone she used when negotiating. We can discuss this rationally. There's nothing rational about how you've treated David tonight, or how you've treated me for most of my life. The truth poured out of me, unstoppable. You've never loved me unconditionally. You've loved the idea of me. The perfectly programmed Parker heir who would validate your life choices and social position. But that person doesn't exist. She never did. My mother's carefully composed facade cracked, tears welling in her eyes. Whether from genuine emotion or frustration at losing control of the situation, I couldn't tell. You're throwing away advantages most people would sacrifice everything for, she said, her voice breaking. For what? A blue-collar romance that won't last past the first financial strain? David stood beside me, his hand finding mine. Mrs. Parker, money problems can strain any relationship, but so can lack of respect, empathy, and genuine connection, qualities that can't be purchased at any price. My father's face had turned an alarming shade of red. Get out of my house. Both of you. We walked out without another word, the heavy front door closing behind us with resonant finality. In the car, I dissolved into tears. Tears of anger, relief, and a grief so profound it felt physical. David drove in silence for several minutes, one hand steady on the wheel, the other holding mine. I'm so sorry, I finally managed. I knew it would be bad, but that was brutal, he supplied, his voice gentle, but not surprising. You're not running for the hills? I asked, attempting a watery smile. He pulled the car to the side of the road and turned to face me fully. Rachel Parker, it would take a lot more than a couple of country club snobs to scare me away from the best thing that's ever happened to me. His steadfast presence, his refusal to be diminished by my parents' cruelty, was exactly why I loved him. In that moment, I knew with absolute certainty that I had chosen correctly. Not just in David, but in the authentic life I was building, free from the golden handcuffs of my upbringing. As we drove away from my childhood home, I felt both the weight of what I was losing and the lightness of what I was choosing instead. The road ahead might not be paved with privilege and connections, but it would be real, earned, and true to who I was meant to be. 6 months after the disastrous dinner with my parents, David and I were walking through Boston Common on a crisp October evening. The trees blazed with autumn colors, and street musicians filled the air with acoustic melodies. We'd just had dinner at our favorite neighborhood bistro, nothing fancy, just good food and better company. Let's sit for a minute, David suggested, pointing to a bench overlooking the duck pond where we'd had our third date. I nestled against him, comfortable, in the familiar warmth of his embrace. We watched a family feeding ducks, the children's laughter carrying across the water. Remember when we talked about what makes a good life? David asked, his voice thoughtful. You said it was about creating moments worth remembering, I replied, smiling at the memory of that conversation. And you said it was about loving deeply and being true to yourself. He shifted slightly, turning to face me. I've been thinking about those definitions a lot lately. Something in his tone made my heart quicken. He reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. Rachel Parker, you've shown me what it means to have courage in your convictions, to choose authenticity over expectation. You love children who aren't yours as if they were. You find wonder in ordinary days, and you've never once made me feel like I'm not enough. His voice grew husky with emotion. I want to build a life of real moments with you. Messy, beautiful, honest moments. Will you marry me? He opened the box to reveal a ring, Not a flashy diamond that would have impressed my parents' circle, but a unique vintage band with a small sapphire surrounded by tiny pearls. It was my grandmother's, he explained nervously. If it's not your style, we can choose something else. I know it's not what you grew up with. It's perfect, I interrupted, tears flowing freely now. Absolutely perfect. Yes, David. Yes, I'll marry you. As he slipped the ring onto my finger, I felt a profound sense of rightness. This man, with his integrity, his gentle strength, his capacity for joy, was my family now. The choice was as easy as breathing. Later that night, curled against him in our bed, reality began to assert itself. We should probably start thinking about the wedding, I murmured. Anything special you've always dreamed of? David asked, stroking my hair. I considered the question honestly. Growing up, my mother had occasionally mentioned what my wedding would entail: Plaza Hotel ballroom, at least 300 guests, designer gown, society photographer. None of it had ever resonated with me. Something small, I said with certainty. Meaningful, just people who truly care about us. My kind of wedding, David smiled. Simple, sincere, focused on what matters. Over the next few weeks, our vision took shape. We decided on a spring ceremony in the community garden where we volunteered on weekends. With its flowering trees and winding paths, it offered natural beauty without pretension. Our budget was modest but adequate. A combination of our savings meant no debt to start our marriage. David's family embraced our engagement with genuine enthusiasm. His mother, Eleanor, a petite woman with David's warm eyes and practical nature, hugged me fiercely when we shared the news. "You're the daughter I always wanted," she whispered, making me tear up all over again. His sister Lisa and her husband James immediately offered their backyard for the reception if we needed it. Their 3 boys, now 8, 6, and 4, debated who would get to be the ring bearer with such intensity that we eventually decided all 3 would share the honor. My circle of support came from chosen family, fellow teachers who had become close friends, neighbors in my apartment building, former students' parents who had become mentors and confidants. My best friend Amanda from college immediately claimed maid of honor status and began organizing a modest but joyful bridal shower. The elephant in the room, of course, was my parents. Despite everything, some stubborn part of me hoped they might soften, might recognize that my happiness was worth more than their social aspirations. 3 months into planning, I finally gathered the courage to call them. My mother answered on the 4th ring, her voice carefully neutral. "Rachel, this is unexpected." "Hi, Mom." I took a deep breath. "I'm calling because I have news. David and I are engaged." The silence stretched so long I wondered if we'd been disconnected. "I see," she finally said. "That's quite definitive. We're getting married in May at Hawthorne Community Garden. It's going to be small, but meaningful." Another pause. "Have you considered that you're making a rather hasty decision? Marriage is a serious commitment. We've been together for almost 2 years, Mom. We know what we want. And what about your future? Children? Will you be satisfied with a husband who can't provide the opportunities you had?" The familiar frustration rose in my throat. David provides everything that matters: respect, partnership, joy. And he does quite well financially. Not that you bothered to learn anything about his career. Your father and I simply want security. For you. No, you want status. There's a difference. I heard her intake of breath, the pause that indicated she was choosing her words carefully. "Is your father's presence expected at this garden ceremony?" The traditional role, walking me down the aisle, hung unspoken between us. "I would like both of you there, as guests who support our happiness." "I'll discuss it with your father," she said, non-committal. "Is there a specific date we should be aware of?" I provided the details, trying to squash the foolish hope rising in my chest. The call ended cordially but without warmth, leaving me unsettled. Wedding planning continued around this uncertainty. I found a simple but elegant dress at a consignment shop specializing in bridal wear, a fraction of what my mother would have expected me to spend, but perfect for our garden setting. David's mother altered it expertly, adding delicate beadwork to the bodice as her gift to me. With 2 months until the wedding, my kindergarten students became enthusiastically involved in preparations. They created artwork for the ceremony, Space, practiced a special song to perform, and asked daily for updates on Miss Rachel's Princess Day. Their excitement was contagious, their unfiltered joy a reminder of why simplicity often trumps extravagance. 1 week before the wedding, having heard nothing definitive from my parents, I sent a final invitation, a handwritten letter expressing both my hope for their presence and my determination to move forward with or without their blessing. I poured my heart onto the page, explaining what David meant to me, the life we envisioned together, and my wish for reconciliation despite our differences. The letter represented my last olive branch, extended despite the pain of our estrangement. 3 days before the wedding, my phone pinged with a text message from my father's number. Heart racing, I opened it to find 6 words that crystallized 2 decades of conditional love. It's just a trivial event for someone at the bottom. The words struck with physical force, stealing my breath. Not just a rejection of our invitation, but a final judgment on the life I'd chosen. In their estimation, I had descended to the bottom by prioritizing happiness over status, authenticity over advantage. I showed the message to David that evening, my hands shaking. His face darkened with rare anger before softening into concern. "They're wrong, Rachel. So profoundly wrong." He pulled me close. "But their absence doesn't diminish what we're building. If anything, it clarifies the difference between hollow success and genuine fulfillment." Surrounded by his steady strength, I allowed myself to grieve, not just for their absence at our wedding, but for the parents I had never truly had. People who could measure their only child's joy and dismiss it as trivial had never been capable of the unconditional love I deserved. As the tears subsided, resolve took their place. My parents had made their choice. Now I would make mine, to celebrate fully, to love deeply, and to create a marriage defined by acceptance rather than achievement. May 15th dawned clear and perfect, as if nature itself approved of our union. Sunlight filtered through the cherry blossoms at Hawthorne Community Garden, casting dappled patterns across the white chairs arranged in intimate semicircles. Potted flowers lined the simple aisle, and an arch woven with greenery and spring blooms marked where we would exchange vows. I woke in Amanda's guest room, where tradition had dictated I spend the night away from David. My dress hung by the window, catching morning light that made the vintage beadwork shimmer. Despite my resolution to focus on joy, I felt my parents' absence like a physical ache. "You okay?" Amanda asked, appearing with coffee and concern in equal measure. "Just thinking about who won't be here," I admitted. She sat beside me, her directness one of the qualities I'd always valued in our friendship. "Their loss, Rachel. Completely, entirely their loss." My phone buzzed with a text from David. "Counting the minutes until you're my wife. All my love, D." The simple message centered me. Today wasn't about who was missing, but who had chosen to be present. David's love, his family's embrace, friends who supported us, the community we'd built together. Eleanor arrived to help with hair and makeup, bringing her practical warmth and something borrowed, her mother's pearl earrings that complemented my engagement ring. Lisa came with her signature chaos, 3 excited boys in miniature suits and a container of homemade cookies for bridal emergencies. By early afternoon, I was ready. The butterflies in my stomach were excitement, not doubt. As I waited, In the garden's small office building that served as our bridal room, a knock came at the door. "Special delivery," called a familiar voice. My classroom assistant, Jen, entered with a handmade card signed by all 24 of my kindergartners, their wobbly signatures and colorful drawings a testament to love in its purest form. "They're all out there," Jen grinned, "dressed up and sworn to best behavior, though Marcus already has grass stains on his knees." The mental image of my students witnessing this important moment brought fresh tears. "They're going to be perfect," I said. "Grass stains and all." As the ceremony time approached, Amanda helped arrange my dress and handed me a bouquet of wildflowers and herbs from the community garden. "Ready to do this?" I nodded, a calm certainty washing over me. This was right. This was true. The original plan had been for me to walk alone, a statement of independence that seemed appropriate given the circumstances. But as I stepped outside, I found David's mother waiting. "I thought you might want an arm to hold on to," Eleanor offered gently. "No pressure either way." The gesture, understanding both my potential desire for support and my need for autonomy, was so thoughtful that it threatened my carefully applied makeup. "I'd be honored," I managed, linking my arm through hers. The small gathering rose as we appeared. Only 60 guests, but each face represented genuine connection. David's construction crew stood alongside my teacher colleagues. His nephews fidgeted beside my students. Neighbors, friends, and chosen family filled every chair. And at the end of the aisle stood David, handsome in a charcoal suit, his eyes finding mine with such naked adoration that everything else faded away. This man, this kind, hard-working, honest man, was minutes away from becoming my husband. Our ceremony was brief but meaningful. We exchanged vows we'd written ourselves, promising partnership, respect, and a shared definition of success that prioritized joy over status. David's oldest nephew presented the rings with solemn importance. My kindergarten class sang an enthusiastically off-key rendition of "What a Wonderful World" that left not a dry eye in the garden. As the officiant pronounced us husband and wife, cherry blossom petals drifted down like nature's confetti. David kissed me with reverent tenderness, and cheers erupted from our small but mighty congregation. The reception, held in the garden's community pavilion, embodied the same unpretentious joy. Potluck dishes prepared by friends sat alongside catering from our favorite local restaurant. A playlist of songs meaningful to our relationship replaced an expensive band. Instead of a lavish multi-tiered cake, we had cupcakes in various flavors, decorated by David's nephews and my students in a chaotic rainbow of sprinkles and frosting. 2 hours into the celebration, as David and I moved among our guests, sharing laughs and collecting hugs, a stir near the entrance caught my attention. My heart stuttered as I recognized the two figures standing awkwardly at the periphery. My parents had come after all, dressed as if for a charity gala, looking utterly out of place among our casually festive gathering. My mother's critical gaze swept over the handmade decorations and mismatched china. My father scanned the crowd with the assessment of someone calculating net worth and finding it wanting. David noticed them at the same moment, his hand tightening protectively around mine. "Your call," he murmured. "Whatever you want to do." After a moment's hesitation, I nodded toward them. "Let's get this over with." We approached together, united, in a way my parents had never witnessed. They stiffened as we drew near, their discomfort evident in rigid postures and tight smiles. "You came," I said simply, neither accusatory nor particularly welcoming. "We reconsidered," my father replied stiffly, "despite our concerns." My mother's gaze fixed on a point just past my shoulder. The ceremony was quaint. The familiar diminishment threatened to ignite old insecurities, but David's steady presence beside me kept them at bay. "We thought so too," he said pleasantly. "Simple, sincere, exactly what we wanted." An uncomfortable silence followed before my father cleared his throat. "We've brought a gift." He extended an envelope with the thickness that suggested a substantial check. "For your future." I made no move to take it. "What changed your mind? 3 days ago, this was a trivial event for someone at the bottom." My mother flinched slightly at having her husband's cruel words quoted back. "Your father was upset. The text was impulsive." "It was honest," I countered. "The clearest statement of how you see me and the life I've chosen." "Rachel," my father's CEO voice emerged, "let's not create a scene. We're here now, making an effort." "An effort?" I felt a lifetime of suppressed feelings rising. "You've spent my entire life making it clear that I'm only valuable if I live according to your definition of success. You've dismissed my career, insulted my husband, and rejected my choices at every turn. Now you show up at my wedding with a check and expect gratitude?" "We want what's best for you," my mother insisted, her voice trembling slightly. "No, you want what reflects best on you," I corrected. "There's a difference." David, sensing my growing distress, spoke with calm authority. "Mr. and Mrs. Parker, Rachel and I appreciate that you came today, but this is our celebration, a day of joy and authentic connection. If you'd like to be part of that, you're welcome to stay. But if you're here to judge or to make one last attempt to change Rachel's mind about her life choices, this isn't the appropriate venue." My father's face darkened. "Young man, you don't dictate terms to us." "I'm not dictating anything," David replied evenly. "I'm setting a boundary around our wedding day. Rachel deserves that protection." In that moment, watching David advocate for my emotional well-being without hesitation or intimidation, any lingering doubt about our partnership vanished completely. This was what unconditional support looked like. This was what family should be. "Stay if you want to celebrate with us," I said with newfound calmness. "Leave if you can't. But that envelope stays with you either way. We don't need your money. We need your respect. And if that's not available, we'll continue building our life without it." My mother's carefully composed facade cracked slightly. "Rachel, please, we're trying." "Are you? Or are you here to assuage your guilt, to maintain appearances?" I shook my head. "I spent years trying to earn your approval. I'm done with that now. This is who I am. A teacher, a wife to a wonderful carpenter, a woman who measures wealth in connection and purpose, rather than square footage and stock options." My father, unused to being challenged, drew himself up to full height. "You're making a mistake. The only mistake was expecting you to see beyond your own narrow definition of success." I took David's hand firmly in mine. "If you decide you want a relationship with us on these terms, accepting who we are without conditions, you know where to find us. Until then, I think it's best if you go." For a moment, I thought they might argue further. Instead, my father tucked the envelope back into his jacket pocket with deliberate precision. "When reality sets in," he said with cold certainty, "don't come looking for rescue." They turned and left, my mother casting one last conflicted glance over her shoulder before they disappeared through the garden gate. I stood trembling, adrenaline coursing through me. David wrapped his arms around me, a shelter in the emotional storm. "You okay?" he whispered against my hair. "I think I will be," I answered honestly. That felt necessary. Amanda appeared at my side, protectiveness radiating from her. "Everything all right? Need me to chase down any snooty party?" "Crashers?" The comment startled a laugh from me, breaking the tension. "No chasing required, but maybe another glass of champagne." As she hurried off to fulfill this request, David's nephews bounded up, oblivious to the drama that had just unfolded. "Aunt Rachel!" the youngest called excitedly. "We saved you the cupcake with the most sprinkles!" Just like that, the dark moment passed, Looking around at the faces of people who loved us exactly as we were, David's family, my friends, colleagues, students, I realized that the absence of conditional approval had made space for something far more valuable: authentic connection. We returned to our celebration with renewed appreciation for the community we'd built. We danced beneath string lights as evening fell, cut cupcakes with exaggerated ceremony to the delight of the children present, and accepted heartfelt toasts from people who genuinely wished us well. My parents' brief appearance faded like a minor discord in an otherwise beautiful composition. This day, imperfect, authentic, joyful, belonged to us and the values we cherished. No one could diminish that, not even the people who had given me life, but never quite learned how to give me love without conditions. Our first year of marriage unfolded in a modest 2-bedroom apartment in Jamaica Plain, a far cry from the Beacon Hill townhouse my parents had once suggested would be my starter home. The space was small but filled with character, original, hardwood floors, built-in bookshelves, and windows that caught the morning light. David renovated the outdated kitchen himself, installing open shelving and butcher block counters that transformed the space without extravagant expense. We furnished our home gradually, finding treasures at estate sales and flea markets, each piece selected for meaning rather than status. David crafted our dining table from reclaimed wood, while I haunted thrift stores for the mismatched vintage chairs that surrounded it. The result was neither impressive by design magazine standards nor suitable for my parents' approval, but it was distinctly, authentically ours. Financial reality meant careful budgeting. My teacher's salary covered our basic expenses, while David's more variable income went toward savings and occasional treats. We learned the art of meaningful frugality, cooking elaborate meals at home instead of dining out, hosting game nights with friends instead of expensive entertainment, finding free community events that enriched our weekends without depleting our bank account. You know what I love about our life? David mused one evening as we sat on our small balcony, sharing an inexpensive bottle of wine while watching the neighborhood bustle below. We make deliberate choices. Nothing's automatic or expected or just for show. I understood exactly what he meant. Every aspect of our existence together had been consciously created rather than prescribed by social expectation or inherited privilege. There was profound satisfaction in that intentionality, in knowing that our happiness was built, choice by choice, from authentic values rather than external validation. That autumn brought exciting professional developments for both of us. After 5 years of teaching, I was selected as lead kindergarten teacher at my school, with additional responsibilities mentoring new educators. The position came with a modest raise but significant professional recognition of my dedication and skill. David, meanwhile, was promoted to senior project manager, overseeing the company's most complex renovations. His first major assignment was the historical restoration of a 19th-century library, a project that combined his technical expertise with his appreciation for craftsmanship and preservation. "They're letting me assemble my own team," he told me excitedly after receiving the news. "I can bring in the best people, implement the systems I've been advocating for years." We celebrated these milestones simply but meaningfully. A picnic in the Arnold Arboretum, where autumn leaves created a natural canopy of gold and crimson above us. Our achievements might have seemed modest by my parents' standards, but they represented growth on our own terms, success measured by impact and satisfaction rather than prestige or wealth. Contact with my parents remained minimal and formal. Occasional text messages acknowledging birthdays or major holidays, but no meaningful connection. The wound of their rejection had begun to scar over, still tender when pressed, but no longer actively bleeding. I had stopped expecting their approval and had found liberation in that surrender. David's family filled much of the emotional space my parents had left vacant. Sunday dinners at Eleanor's modest apartment became a cherished ritual, with his sister's family joining whenever possible. These gatherings, noisy, chaotic, and overflowing with genuine affection, taught me what family could and should be. Eleanor's unconditional support, her pride in both our accomplishments and our character, was the maternal presence I had always craved. "You've brought so much joy to David," she told me one afternoon as we washed dishes together after dinner. "He was always a good man, but with you he's become his best self." "He does the same for me," I replied, touched by her perception. "That's the secret, isn't it?" She handed me a plate to dry. "Not finding someone perfect, but finding someone who helps you grow in the right directions." Our social circle expanded through a rich tapestry of connections. Colleagues from both our workplaces, neighbors who became friends, former students' families who remained in our lives. We hosted potluck dinners where construction workers conversed with teachers, artists mingled with accountants, and hierarchies dissolved in favor of genuine interaction. These gatherings would have horrified my status-conscious parents, but they nourished us in ways professional networking events never could. Without the pressure to impress or advance, people shared their authentic selves, their struggles, their joys, their unvarnished truths. From these honest exchanges came true community, a support system built on mutual care rather than mutual advantage. In late spring, about 18 months into our marriage, an unexpected joy entered our lives. The home pregnancy test showed 2 pink lines transforming an ordinary Tuesday morning into a pivot point in our journey together. "We're going to be parents," I whispered to David, showing him the test with hands that trembled with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. His expression moved from shock to wonder to absolute joy in the span of seconds. He lifted me in a gentle embrace, careful even in his excitement, before setting me down and placing a reverent hand on my still flat abdomen. "A family," he said, voice thick with emotion. "Our family." The practical implications settled in quickly. Our apartment, perfect for 2, would be cramped with a child. Our careful budget would need adjustment to accommodate new expenses. My teaching schedule would require rethinking, as would David's occasional weekend work. But beneath these logistical concerns ran a current of profound joy. This child would be raised with values we both cherished: integrity over appearance, compassion over competition, authenticity over advantage. We would build for them a home rich in love if not in luxury, abundant in experiences if not in excess. As we began preparations, the question of my parents inevitably arose. Despite everything, they were this child's grandparents. Did we attempt reconciliation for our baby's sake? Did biology trump behavior when it came to family connections? After much discussion, we decided to reach out one more time, not from need or desperation, but from a position of strength and clarity. I suggested meeting on neutral territory, a cafe halfway between our apartment and their Wellesley estate. To my surprise, they agreed. On a sunny Saturday morning, we sat across from them at an outdoor table, the awkwardness between us almost tangible. My mother looked thinner, my father grayer, both of them somehow diminished since our wedding confrontation. 2 years earlier. "You're looking well," my mother offered, her eyes taking in my simple sundress and the subtle rounding of my midsection that wasn't yet obvious to strangers. "We are well," I replied, deliberately including David in the assessment. "Very well, actually, which is partly why we wanted to meet." David took my hand supportively as I shared our news. "I'm pregnant. You're going to be grandparents in about 6 months." The announcement landed with visible impact. My mother's hand flew to her throat, while my father's customary mask of detachment slipped momentarily. "A baby," my mother breathed, something like longing crossing her face. "Oh, Rachel." My father recovered more quickly. "Congratulations," he said, professional courtesy masking whatever true emotions stirred beneath. "Have you considered the financial implications? Children are extraordinarily expensive. Some things never changed." "We've prepared as much as anyone can," David answered calmly. "We have health insurance, savings, and a plan for childcare that works with our schedules." But surely you must be concerned about educational opportunities, my father pressed. Private schools, enrichment activities, college funds? Dad, I interrupted firmly. We didn't come here to request financial assistance or advice. We're managing our lives according to our values, including how we'll raise our child. We simply thought you should know, David added, and to suggest that if you want to be part of this child's life, we're open to rebuilding a relationship, with certain boundaries. My mother leaned forward slightly. What sort of boundaries? Respect for our choices, I stated clearly. Acceptance of our lifestyle and values. No undermining our parenting decisions or trying to impose your definitions of success on our child. That seems reasonable, my mother said, surprising me with her quick agreement. My father looked less convinced. You're essentially asking us to disregard everything we know about providing advantages and opportunities. No, I corrected. I'm asking you to expand your definition of what constitutes an advantage. Our child will have the advantage of parents who value their unique personality over their achievements. The advantage of understanding that worth isn't measured by income or status. The advantage of growing up in a home where love isn't conditional on meeting external expectations. Heavy silence followed this declaration. My father studied his coffee cup while my mother blinked rapidly against unexpected tears. We may have made mistakes, she finally said, her voice uncharacteristically vulnerable. Perhaps we focused too much on the wrong things. It wasn't quite an apology, but it was more acknowledgement than I'd ever received. My father remained silent, his struggle visible in the tightness around his mouth, the slight tremor in his normally steady hands. We're not asking for dramatic changes overnight, David offered gently. Just openness to a different perspective, a willingness to see value in a life that doesn't match your blueprint. And if we can't, my father asked bluntly, then we'll continue as we have been, I answered honestly. Our child will know they have grandparents, but the relationship will remain distant. That would be sad, but it's your choice. The remainder of our meeting was tentative, fragile, small talk about the pregnancy, cautious questions about our lives, careful avoidance of triggering topics. We parted with no dramatic resolution, just a tacit agreement to try again, to see if understanding might grow where judgment had previously flourished. As David and I walked back to our car, I felt lighter somehow. That went better than I expected, I admitted. They're trying, he observed. Your mom more than your dad, but still, it's something. Do you think they can actually change? Accept us as we are? David considered this thoughtfully. People can surprise you. Maybe not completely, not overnight, but becoming grandparents shifts perspective. It's a powerful motivator. In the months that followed, small indicators suggested he might be right. My mother began sending occasional texts asking how I was feeling. My father forwarded articles about early childhood development without accompanying criticism of our parenting philosophy. They even sent a gift, a beautiful wooden cradle that, my mother noted in the card, doesn't come with strings attached. These were tiny steps on a long journey toward healing. I harbored no illusions that my parents would suddenly transform into warm, accepting people who fully embraced our choices. But perhaps they could learn to respect them, to see that success had many definitions beyond the narrow parameters they had always recognized. As my due date approached, we moved to a small house in Roslindale, still modest by my parents' standards, but perfect for our growing family. It needed work, which David tackled with his usual skill and care, transforming dated spaces into a home uniquely suited to our needs. The nursery he created, with hand-built furniture and walls painted a peaceful green, became my favorite room, a physical manifestation of the love awaiting our child. The lessons of my journey settled into clarity as I prepared for motherhood. I had discovered that authentic wealth wasn't measured in square footage or stock portfolios, but in relationships built on acceptance rather than expectation. True security came not from trust funds or social connections, but from knowing your own worth independent of external validation. Most importantly, I had learned that family, real family, was defined by how people treated each other, not by biological connection or shared surnames. It could be created as well as inherited, chosen as well as assigned. The family David and I were building would be founded on unconditional love, mutual respect, and the freedom to become one's authentic self. On the morning I felt the first contractions, I experienced a moment of perfect peace amidst the physical discomfort. Whatever happened with my parents, whatever challenges lay ahead, we had created something beautiful and true, a life of integrity, a partnership of equals, a home where love was given freely, not as reward for meeting predetermined criteria. That was success by any meaningful measure, and it was more than enough. Have you ever had to choose between family expectations and your own authentic path? What helped you find the courage to follow your heart? Share your experiences in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe if this story resonated with you. Remember, true wealth isn't measured by what you own, but by who loves you for exactly who you are. Thank you for listening to my journey, and may you find the strength to create a life that's genuinely yours.